Alright, so what's up you guys, it's your boy X, and today we are back at it again with another Memoria Freese video. Now for today, we finally have news on the collab. It has been finally announced that we are getting a Goblin Slayer collab. Now this collab will be a two-part collab. Part 1 drops on the 31st of January 2020. However, with how time zones work, this might or might not be either a Thursday or a Friday from what it seems like, so be aware of that. Now part 2 will drop on the 13th of February. Now my general advice will be to hold down some iris because you never know what's lurking around the corner for part 2, so unless you are really certain with what you want or you have the iris to fund it, please hold on doing so until then. However, to help you guys out, at least for 1/4 of a multi, we do receive 100 free iris when the collab starts, so make sure to put it where it counts. Now to go a bit more in detail on what this holds as a collab itself and what we can expect from it, like I mentioned a second ago, this is indeed a two-part collab, which also brings along a total of 2 tails. So that means we are in for some iris depending on the size of these tails, but regardless, this should bring in quite a bit to give the funding or the landing hand to getting what you want from the gachas, because the units that have been announced are actually looking pretty nice. Which brings me on the next topic, which will be the free units that we will be receiving from this collab. And yes, you heard that right, we will be seeing some free units coming down our way with this collab, so even if you do hold out on spending your iris for whatever reason, you will be sure to get your hands on at least 2 new units. For starters, we are receiving a free 4-star Goblin Slayer, and it seems to be that this will be a case of Argo 2.0, and what I mean by that is that they will hand out 1 copy of a banner unit at the end of the story event in game. And I think players will recognize this as what happened with Agronaut as well, because that did happen with Agronaut. They did release an Agronaut copy at the end of the story tale, so if you did have the plans of MLBing Goblin Slayer the moment you saw this title, then for sure this will help you out in the long run. But it doesn't end there quite yet, because we do have a new farmable unit as well, and the farmable unit in this case is a waifu, which makes me very happy on a personal level. We will see a farmable noble fencer coming our way as well, so those are the 2 units that you can definitely count on cruising down your box. Now this too should give some additional iris if you consider the limit breaking the farmable unit, so all in all, not too bad of a deal at all. And having a free copy of a gacha unit is a trend I hope to see Memoria keeps up, because it does really help for those who are wanting to MLB these specific units. Now to stay on topic of units, we will dig right into all these confirmed units and talk about what they do, because we do have their skill sets and skill assists available. We have a total of 7 units to go through as of now, so let's kick it off with the main man himself, aka the Goblin Slayer. Now this free Goblin Slayer is actually quite interesting, and to dig into what he does, for his SA, he has a single target ultra dark physical attack and damage plus 60 per SCR boost on himself, and on top of that he also has a buff for 3 turns for SCR and dark damage plus 90%. Then to go into his actual skill set, for his first skill he has a buff, which is an enemy's crit and penetration rate and physical resist and dark resist minus 30% for 4 turns. Then for his second attack he has an AoE mid dark physical attack with an ultra on guard, and for 4 turns he takes down the SD and AoE resist for minus 20% on enemies. Then for his last skill he has a single target super dark physical attack with high penetration and an SCR boost, and on top of that for 3 turns he self buffs for STR and dark damage plus 40%. Now his passive isn't too surprising, it is after all an Ogre killer. All around I'd say it's a very solid character to have around in your box, as many of the options to bring out on the field. Personally, this is not something I can directly use as of now, but for those who are rocking those physical dark teams, this could very well be a nice addition to add on to your lineup with this skill set. Then to move over from the Goblin Slayer himself, we do have the free noble fencer. For her SA, she has an AoE ultra thunder physical attack with a temporary SCR boost, and for 3 turns she buffs herself with an STR and thunder damage plus 50%. Then to go into her actual skill set, just like Goblin Slayer, she has a buff for the first skill slot. For 4 turns, 20% HP regen on allies and a self STR and thunder buff plus 25%. Then for her second skill, she has an AoE fast low thunder physical attack, and she removes STR and magic buffs excluding the assist skills. Then for the last skill slot, she has a single target mid thunder physical attack with a high penetration rate, and for 4 turns a minus 25% on STR and magic for enemies. Then that was that for the free units, and this is the interesting part where we dig into the gacha banner units, since those do kinda make or break break the deal on whether or not this collab was actually really worth it, and without too much time wasting, we'll dig right into it with the priestess herself. Now, to get into her skill set, for her SA she has an Ultra Thunder magic attack with a temporary magic boost, and for 3 turns she buffs allies for an STR and magic plus 80%. Then to go into her actual skill set, for her first skill she has a buff, which is for 3 turns an STR and magic minus 30% on enemies and allies plus 35% HP regen. Then for her second skill slot she has yet another buff, which is an SA Gouge plus 33% on allies, and against enemies she does a low thunder magic attack with an ultra encounter. Then for the third skill slot she has a single target super thunder magic attack with a temporary magic boost, and for allies she buffs the status buff, and against enemies a status debuff for plus 2 turns. Her passive is a counter heal for HP and MP 8% regen. Then to leave the priestess alone for a second, we move over to the next unit, which is the High Elf Archer. Now for her SA she has an AoE Thunder Ultra physical attack with an Ultra and Guard, and for 3 turns she actually debuffs the enemies with a physical resist and a thunder resist minus 30%. Then to go into her skill set, for her first skill shot she has a buff as well, which is a self buff for dexterity and thunder damage plus 60%, and an allies buff for dexterity and thunder plus 30% for a total of 5 turns. Then for her second skill she has an AoE slow super physical attack with an ultra penetration and a skill damage plus 60% on stunned targets, and for 3 turns she buffs herself with an STR buff plus 60%. Then for her last skill she has a single target high physical attack with an ultra critical and a skill damage plus 30% for each self dexterity buff. Now for her passive she's an all grade killer, however this is where it gets interesting because she has a 90% stun upon counter attack. Now the first thing I want to note is that passive, because it seems pretty busted. I honestly have no idea on why they made it such a high percentage. Maybe this is a play on something they do in the anime or whatever, because I honestly did not watch the show as of now. However, what I do know is that this is definitely a great selling point for this character, specifically with her skill set. Then to move over from the archer, we have our final unit for part 1, which is none other than our boy Uka. Now for his SA, he has an AoE Dark Ultra physical attack with an Ultra and Guard and a skill damage plus 50% for each self dexterity buff that he has. Then to go into his actual skill set, for his first skill he has a buff to himself, which is a 5-turn buff for STR Dark, Guard rate and counter rate plus 40%. Then for his second skill he has quite a lot going for him, because he does have an AoE Dark high physical attack with a high penetration and a temporary STR boost. He also has a self status buff plus 2 turns and a plus 10% HP lifesteal. Then for his last attack he has a single target dark high physical attack with an ultra critical and a temporary STR boost and taunt, and for his passive he has a 60% taunt up on counter attack. Now Uka has a slightly different passive with a lower percentage compared to the archer as well. However, that 60% taunt is still nothing to overlook, considering he busts his own counter rate by 40%. So all in all, these units are definitely going in when it comes down to the counters at all costs. Uka might be a little bit downplayed when it comes down to the percentage on his passive. However, that does not mean that he is a sleeper or any of the other units are sleepers as well. Then we arrived at the last 2 units of this units batch from part 1, and those are none other than the assist units. Now for the assist units we have the Cowgirl and Chigusa available, and to get into the Cowgirl first, she has an STR and magic plus 50% buff along with an HP regen for plus 15% as well. Then for Chigusa, she has an endurance, agility and dexterity plus 10% for allies and a foe's 80% slow. Now personally, out of the 2 I definitely favor getting Cowgirl. However, that 80% slow on Chigusa isn't terrible by any means, and I think it's safe to conclude that as far as the first part of this units batch go for this collab, we are definitely not left with units not worth anyone's time. So that goes for both the free characters that we are getting as well as the gacha banner units. Now to completely finish the topic of characters, I'll show you guys the banners as well, because that is the place where we will invest our iris in. After all, the banners will be on your screen as we go. So for the first banner we have 3 future units, which are none other than the Slayer himself. We have the Archer Elf and and at last Chigusa as well. Then for banner 2 we have the featured group of the priestess, the cowgirl and Uka as the final unit. Now on a personal note, I'll probably sing the Iris in the priestess banner as soon as I'm done collecting the archer elf myself. The archer elf is actually the one I want the most out of the bunch so far, unless they bring out the sword maiden, which I hope is either a free to play unit or just not a unit at all, because if that is the case then my wallet will probably hate me on a different level. But personal preferences aside, we do have 2 more things to cover up for this video, which one of those things is the login bonus. Now the login bonus will be on your screen right now. It's not really something I'd say worth jumping out your chair for, however free rewards are free rewards, so make sure to collect them as you log in. Then for the last topic of today's video, which is probably most of interest for the sea creatures amongst us, which are none other than the sales. The sales, aka the whale bundles, have the basic sales going on where you get the 400 iris for the price of 300 and the 1600 instead of the 1400. We also have the iris combo with the hero lights available as well for those who might be interested in those packs. Honestly, I have yet to speak to someone who is fond of these sales, but I guess money has a role one way or another. Then for the last part of these sales, we have the collab bundles. Now we don't have specifics on what these bundles will hold, but it shouldn't be too different from what we are used to, which means there will most definitely be a guaranteed collab 4-star ticket in there, some stuff like fauna and so on, so expect those to come around as well. Now that was it for the first part of this collab. We covered everything available to us as of now. Let me know down below if you guys are actually hyped for this collab or the complete opposite, because I did see some mixed opinions on this collab so far. Personally, I don't really care, however I'll never say no to some waifus. So that was it for today guys. It was your boy XavierOnYT coming at you with the Memoria news, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Stay happy, stay blessed, and I'm out. Peace.